Started. So again, welcome, Betsy. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know we had several questions to ask you, and I was very impressed that you've known that you wanted to be a writer since a very young age, and that you developed a real affinity for fairy tales in college, and especially some of the Irish fairy tales. And can you tell us a bit about your retelling and how you use that in your stories?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much again for having me. I'm so glad to get to do this. I think Zoom has really opened up the world for writers who, or for people who are single parents like myself, who can often find it hard to get to do things in person. And especially, I just came back from a book tour in the U.S. Where I really wanted to be able to come visit you all, but wasn't able to put it together. So I'm really delighted to be here now, and I really appreciate everybody coming. So yes, I've wanted to be a writer, I think all my life. I remember being 6 years old and looking at books and thinking I wanted to write books someday. And I think especially fairy tales, I always really enjoyed fantasy literature and fairy tale retellings as a kid. And then when I got older and got to Smith College, I took a wonderful course called Fairy Tales and Gender with a professor also named Betsy Harries, who's one of the best teachers I've ever had. And in that course, I started writing my own fairy tale retellings for the first time. And I'd always wanted to be a writer, as I said, but my early writing teachers told me that I was good at description but bad at plot. And so Betsy Harries sort of introduced the fairy tale as a really strong plot structure that could survive across culture and across time, and that people could sort of rework and retell in their own ways, but it would live on in a form that was compelling to people in all these different cultural and temporal contexts. And so I started to think, well, I could use fairy tales as kind of plot training wheels, or I could use these existing structures and kind of drape my pretty descriptions over them to make up for my own shortcomings as a writer. And that has worked. Most of my published books are fairy tale retellings in one way or another. But I also found that they really did sort of teach me about plot and about storytelling in a way that I've brought into my pieces of writing that aren't retellings. And I teach creative writing at the University of Galway, and most years I have my students write a fairy tale retelling of their own, kind of for those exact reasons. I think it's really useful as a writer to sort of be able to take apart those plot structures and look at them, think about how they work, and which parts you want to use yourself and which ones you don't. And I think it's a really good exercise in sort of critically engaging with a story that you might have heard all your life, and to think about the parts that you love, but also maybe the parts that you want to push back against. Because most of my retellings have been of stories that kind of bother me in some way, as well as stories that I love. And that's something that I learned from Betsy Harries too. Um, so yeah, and actually, Ring of Salt is my first. It's a lot of firsts for me. It's my seventh book, but it's my first book for adults. All my other books have been for young adults, although I hope that adults would like them as well. It's my first nonfiction book, and so it's my first book about me. It's a memoir, whereas my other books have been fantasy. And I think something that a lot of people have asked me as this book was coming out is whether it felt different to write nonfiction than to write fantasy and fairy tale retellings. And it didn't really to me. I think fantasy fiction, I just happen to like it, to enjoy and to sort of find my wheelhouse in fantasy. But fiction for me is always sort of emotionally honest anyway. Like I wouldn't find a story worth writing if it weren't honest and some on some emotional level. And so writing memoir didn't feel that different to me in that regard. And especially, Ring of Salt does engage with a lot of fairy tales. I talk about being a writer of fairy tales and what different stories have meant to me over time. But I think what has felt different that I didn't anticipate is how different it's felt for this book to come out than my other books. I think, my editor called me the night before the book came out, and she just sort of told me that every memoirist she's worked with, it kind of didn't occur to them what it would feel like for people to read such a personal story until the book comes out. And that's been completely true. I think, I kind of had to pretend that no one was going to read it in order to write it. And I think like not having that sort of veil of fantasy or fiction between me and the reader has felt a lot more vulnerable. And this is a book that covers some very personal topics. I talk about domestic violence in it. But that has also then been one of the best parts of the book coming out, is hearing from other people who've been in similar situations. And so I think like the fairy tales have always been a sort of lens for me to think about sort of personal emotional things anyway. And so it's been really great to see that sort of happen in a different way with this book. Yeah. Um, so
Here we are. It was I I grew up listening to Irish fairy tales, so it was very
mhm.
interesting to see you referencing them in your book. And could you tell us a little bit? And I don't think I'll say it right. The Selkie.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. Yeah, actually, yeah. So the Selkie Bride is a Celtic folk tale or fairy tale. Selkies are kind of a variant of mermaids. They're basically seals that can shed their seal skins and turn into people. And I came across the story of the Selkie Bride, which is a popular folk tale about Selkies when I was quite young, and I write about this in the first chapter of the book. And the Selkie Bride is the story of a Selkie whose sealskin is stolen by a fisherman. So she's sort of forced or compelled to become his wife, and bear his children. And then, and without her sealskin, she can never escape him or return to the sea. And eventually, one day, one of her children finds the sealskin that her husband has hidden and gives and asks the mother, the Selkie, what it is, and the Selkie's able to take her skin back and return to the sea. And so it's a kind of tragic story, which a lot of Celtic fairy tales are, but it's one that really stuck with me for different reasons at different points in my life. And I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about it. About any great fairy tale, I think, has enough sort of facets or nuances that you can, sweetheart, I'm in a meeting right now. Sorry. That you can engage with it in different ways at different points in your life. So when I came across the Selkie Bride story as an adolescent, I really saw a lot of themes in it about sort of bodily autonomy and feeling comfortable in your skin and sort of being in a controlling household. And all of those things are very valid readings of the story, I think. And my first book, Tides, which came out 12 years ago now, I wrote as a college student, and it is a modern day retelling of the Selkie Bride story that sort of focuses on those themes. And it's a young adult coming of age story. But then when I became a mother, and found myself in an abusive marriage, the motherhood themes of the Selkie story really stood out to me in a way that they hadn't before. And so a thread of this memoir is about the different ways that I saw and engaged with the same story as I became a mom. And that might lead me into doing a short reading, if you don't mind, just
We
to,
would
because
love that. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. And so I'll read the prologue from this book, which talks a little bit about the Selkie story and how I was feeling about it. So because it's the prologue, it is the way that I intended to introduce the reader to the book. So I won't introduce it much more than this at this point. But it's just a short moment, and something that I also found at almost every event that I've had, there's been someone in the audience who's interested in writing memoir. So the one thing that I will say is a writer friend of mine introduced me to the idea of the little e structure for writing a memoir that I found really helpful, which is basically you start with a particularly compelling or interesting moment, hopefully just a little moment from the middle of your story, and that's your prologue. And then you circle back from there to the sort of chronological beginning of your story, and start chapter one at the beginning, and then you kind of explain how you got to this middle moment and then carry on. So it kind of makes this little spiral or lowercase e shape. And I found that very helpful as a just sort of getting started structure. So this is my little e moment in my prologue here. So, prologue, spring 2018. We left home on my baby's first birthday. I hadn't known when I packed his diaper bag that morning that it would never feel safe to go back. I baked a loaf of soda bread and left it cooling on the counter. I put in a load of laundry. I packed a spare outfit for my baby, but not for myself. That evening found us in a hotel an hour away. booked in under a false name so that my husband wouldn't find us. My trunk was full of store-brand baby food, diapers, and a cardboard box of ill-fitting donated clothes from the Domestic Violence Center. I set my baby down in the hotel's folding cot, planning to take a shower, but as soon as I stood up, I knew that if I let him out of my sight for a second, I was going to throw up. I got down on the floor with him instead. I helped him stack the soft fabric blocks that the shelter had also given me, their bright sides decorated with fruit and flowers, numbers, and houses. His chubby baby hands reached out to pat my knees, my face, my recently buzzed off hair. My body would not stop shaking. I pulled him onto my lap and felt his warmth and weight. He was here with me. He was safe. No one had taken him away. But I did not know how long that would be true. In this unfamiliar hotel room, in this small town, in this country that was not my own, we were completely alone. There, on the floor with my baby, I thought of water. The receptionist had told me the hotel had a pool, and I was suddenly overcome with longing for a swim, for the antiseptic smell of chlorine, the cool blue lights, the relief of buoyancy. I wanted so badly to feel held. Spending any of the little money I had, money I knew we'd need to stretch as far as possible into an unknowable, frightening future, felt shameful. But I paid a couple of precious euros for an individually wrapped swim diaper in the lobby. I wore a black tank top and underwear and hoped it looked like a one-piece suit. I took the towels from our room and brought us down, down into the belly of the hotel, to the small round pool. I descended the wet tiled stairs with Robin in my arms and let the water gradually take his weight and mine. He had never been in a pool before, or any body of water big enough to hold him. My husband and I had dipped his fingers in the sea once, months ago, but that was all. He loved the pool at once, smiled and cooed and laughed, and I tried to laugh with him, our voices echoing in that little shell-like space. He snuggled closer into my arms, and I realized a body of water had held him once before. The body had been my own. An older woman was swimming laps at the other end of the pool, encased in a bathing suit with long sleeves and a high-zipped neck. She moved steadily and methodically through the water, back and forth, back and forth. Watching her, I thought of the Selkie Bride. Hers was the story that first brought me to Ireland, the story I retold in my first novel. A seal maiden captured by a fisherman, forced to marry him and bear his children, until she could find the sealskin he'd stolen from her and escape back to the sea. What I had just done, running from home with my baby, didn't feel like an escape. I didn't feel safe and free the way I imagined the Selkie must have, reunited with her own long-lost skin, diving through the depths of her native ocean. I hugged Robin close, never letting his impossibly soft and slippery body leave my hands. Slowly, holding him all the time, I let my feet leave the bottom. So then I go back from there to talking about how I came to Ireland in the first place and when I first met my ex-husband. So that's my kind of middle of the story moment that I then circle back around from. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think Jen wanted to ask a question.
Hi, Betsy. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I know one of your intentions in this book is to bring awareness to domestic abuse. How did that play into it for you?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting. The launch process for this book, one of the things that's been interesting about it is for me, this is a really joyful story. A lot of the story is quite a few of the people who are here that I see on Zoom are names that I recognize from the Smith community and who are supporters of the Knitting Factory. So the whole second half of this book is about after I became a single parent, after I left my after I left a domestic abuse situation, sort of finding my bearings as a single mom, and also dealing with the housing crisis in Ireland, and eventually crowdfunding the purchase of a historic knitting factory in Connemara that I've turned into a family home. And we're currently, as you can see behind me, under big renovations right now to turn it into a residency space for my fellow single parents. And that is really this very joyful work for me that I'm so passionate about. And so it's been, but the story of how I became a single mother is a story of domestic violence, and so balancing the sort of darkness or the harder to read parts of the book with what does feel like a joyful story to me by the end has been interesting, and has also I had sort of forgotten when this book came out. I didn't expect so many of the questions to be about the domestic abuse part of the story, but it completely makes sense, because I do, it was really important to me to be honest about that, because I think it's still something that isn't spoken about enough, and especially because the situation that I was in mostly didn't involve physical abuse, and I think there are so many relationships that are emotionally violent or full of coercive control, but because one person isn't hitting the other person, it kind of isn't acknowledged. And so that one of my highest goal for this book has always been that it would help someone else in a similar situation, so I wanted that to be the case. And I wanted to be honest about getting into the relationship, about what it felt like to be in it, about what it felt like to leave, because I loved my husband very much, and it was really hard for me to leave, and I was only really able to do so for my kids' sake, rather than for my own, which I think is an experience a lot of survivors have. And so it has really meant a lot to me to hear from other survivors, even in just the few weeks that the book has been out, that they recognize their own experience in it. That's been really powerful for me. So,
Well, thank you for sharing.
yeah.
Can I ask you, it's Kathleen again. Can I ask you about the Celtic idea of time? You talked about, oh, did I just lose everybody? Uh-oh.
Oh, I'm still here.
Okay, so sorry. I thought I just, apologies. Because you were just talking about a spiral a bit.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and actually, I had chosen another bit of the book to read, but I can definitely, maybe I can read that part instead, if I can find it. But
Oh,
basically,
you choose,
sure.
please.
Yeah. The spiral motif became very central to the book in ways that I didn't even really anticipate when I was first planning it, because the idea for this book sort of came out of housing insecurity. Basically, my kid and I were briefly homeless, and that was very frightening, obviously, and then sort of trying to reckon with finding affordable housing, which is such a universal problem, but especially is really acute in Ireland right now. And so I was with a friend, and she said, she was not a writer, and she said, "Oh, you should just write a book that'll let you buy a house." And I was like, "Obviously, that's something people can do, you know." And I sort of got swept away with this idea. So the book was always very practical in my mind, that if I could write a book, if I could find, and what she said was that I should find some old weird house in Ireland that no Irish person wants, and write about it in a way that would appeal to Americans, because like we crazy Americans love old damp Irish houses, and that is basically what I did, and so, but as I was writing the proposal, and then as I was putting the book together with my wonderful editor, whose name is Margot Schickmanter, who's actually from Northampton, as it turns out, where Smith College is, so that's cool. But we sort of realized that the right structure for the book was a spiral structure, and part of that was that little e going from the middle of the story and then pulling back, but it also did have to do with the both the sort of Celtic conception of time, which some people might be familiar with this idea of the wheel of the year with the sort of seasonal holidays, and that the Celtic New Year is actually Halloween, Samhain, which is coming right up. So we're about to have, it's also called the Witches' New Year, which I think is fantastic, and that the end of the year is after the harvest. That kind of makes sense, and so the beginning of the year is this time. And as someone who I definitely get a bit of seasonal affective disorder, and I definitely, I struggle with the darkness and the cold in this time of year. And so it is helpful to me to think of this time of year as a beginning. And so maybe that's going to be helpful for some other people here. But then also that, yeah, there's the sort of the that idea of the year as a circle sort of infiltrates culture here in ways that I hadn't imagined before I moved here. And that you do, if you think of time as circular or spiraling, you approach your life differently in a kind of holistic way than if you see it as just a straight line. So I will actually, it'll take me a second to find the page, but I had an argument with the new partner that I started dating after I left my marriage, and I will find it because it always makes me laugh, because he was very offended by the idea of nonlinear time. So let me see. Okay. So yes, so this is like this is a year and a half or so after I've become a single parent, and I had kind of dipped my toes into dating again, and kind of and then COVID happened. So I think, like a lot of people, I found myself on a different relationship timeline than I would have without COVID. But anyway, so I had been dating this man for about 6 months when COVID happened, and he had just told me he loved me, and I was sort of like, oh, you say you love me, I need help with childcare during lockdown, like come help me. And he did, and he really became a wonderful presence in our lives. So this is when we're sort of freshly living together. The next day, I got a book in the mail called The Feminist Architecture of Postmodern Anti-Tales: Space, Time, and Bodies. The author, Dr. Kendra Reynolds, had written to me the previous year to tell me that she was analyzing my book, Tides, alongside the work of fairy tale retelling heroes of mine, like Kate Bernheimer and my absolute favorite writer, Angela Carter, and to ask if I'd like her to send me a finished copy when it was ready. I preened over that book like a megalomaniac. I don't know how Shay stood me reading it aloud, but bless him, he did. He delighted in it right along with me until I got to the chapter about the nature of time. Ooh, I love this, I said as I skimmed the opening page. The violence of masculine clock time. Man, she's so right. Masculine what time? Shay asked, laughing. I read to him the book's argument, which I already considered a self-evident truth, that our modern conception of linear, measurable time was essentially patriarchal. I laughed along with Shay, but it was a laugh of delight and a newly articulated truth. The alarm clock has sounded. Feminists have woken. The mechanical, chronological time of the clock, created by dominant social forces and therefore patriarchy, was established in order to regulate social life, maintain order, and provide a method of control. Chronological and clock time, despite being naturalized, are artificial. That's ridiculous, Shay said. Time wasn't invented to control people. It wasn't invented at all. Time is time, and its arrow moves only one way. That's not sexist. Come on now. He was getting heated, I could tell. He was scrubbing the plates a bit faster. For him, this was as much physical expression of anger as I saw. I briefly remembered Tommy storming into our bedroom to smash plates against the wall and shout at me because I hadn't made him food to take to a horse show the next day. But not even every human culture sees time as linear, I said, a bit frustrated with his frustration. Or if they do, not in the same direction. Here she mentions a culture that conceives of the past as in front of you because you can see it, and the future behind you because you can't. That's cool, Shay said. That's beautiful, but it doesn't affect what time is. It doesn't affect the nature of real time any more than our white Western colonial bullshit whatever concept of time does. Our relative perception of it is always the same, 1 second per, well, second. Time exists out in the universe. It carries on from the Big Bang. Bang, 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 second, second, second. Time is what it is. But how can you know that? How can we know time exists outside of our perception of it? I was getting too airy-fairy, bless you, for even my own taste by then, which takes some doing. But I had found my ground, and I was going to defend it. So I say bless you after the word fairy there, by the way, because there's this sort of, it's a superstition in Ireland that if you say the word fairy when a child is nearby, you have to say bless you as if someone has sneezed, because the fairies are very bad news. You don't want to, you sort of get their attention by saying their name, and they love to steal children. So if you say the word fairy, you should say bless you. I love that. I really try to incorporate it into my daily life. So Shay shook his head, clearly outraged by this train of thought, but still laughing, still looking at me with love and respect. That's just what I mean. It doesn't matter. How could that matter to humans if we can't perceive it or conceive of it? Why bother talking about it or trying to measure it in any way at all? The whole point of time is that it's a human construct, that we name it and use it so that we can function as a society. If time weren't linear and constant and precise, it would be useless. Robin, potty training in front of the television, looked back at us from his plastic potty seat and cackled joyfully, which I felt was an excellent contribution to the debate. Tommy didn't speak to me at all for 3 days once because I said the protagonist of a TV show he liked was a misogynist. When I finally apologized just to get a word out of him, he made me grovel, then poked me so hard in the side I had a bruise and warned me not to criticize the things he loved like that again. Don't you want to know that there are things you can't know, can't understand? I asked. God, no, Shay said. Where's the romance in that? Maybe one of the key differences between us, I thought, was that Shay was science fiction and I was fantasy, not just in our reading preferences, but in our hearts. He loved the things he could understand, and I loved the things I couldn't, science and magic. And yet, there we were, loving each other. Ah, here now, I said, a very Irish turn of phrase as I turned to the next page. Linear time is a phallic construct. Feminine storytellers can reject that linearity. There you go. Stop waving your big old linear time dick at me, Jay. I thought you were a feminist. I thought Tommy was a feminist. After Robin was born, I didn't keep the house clean enough for his taste. Not that he ever cleaned it much himself. And he told me not to talk to him about anything but the baby's welfare until I completed a housekeeping course. He said it was only fair, since he had to go to his abuse perpetrators group, that I take a course to stop abusing him through untidiness, too. Shay swiped a hand across his forehead. A sparkling trail of soap bubbles dripped from his glasses. So what's the alternative then, genuinely? I smiled. Isn't it obvious? Vagina time. We both laughed again. In Ireland, actually. Oh, no. No, in Ireland, the ancient Celts, they thought of time as a circle. A spiral, I mean, circles building on each other. The wheel of the year, you know? My exes and my friend Diarmid, every spring when he saw the new lambs in the fields for the first time, he'd say, may we come around to see them again next year. As if we'd be coming back to the same time, not just the same place. As if it would be the same lambs that we'd be seeing. He said that was a very old saying, and his grandmother used to say it every spring too. He said saying it was like bringing her back for a second. I bet people have always been saying it here. And then the English came along with our clocks and our dick time, and we ruined it. Pretty much. The Celtic idea of time was something I'd always loved. Not linear, but spiraling, circular, a spinning wheel with 8 spokes, the 8 seasonal holidays, beginning with Samhain, the new year. In Celtic times, Dara Malloy had told me, a couple would be handfasted for a year and a day before their marriage. If at the end of that year they still wished to be wed, there was a second and more binding ceremony. If not, the cord that had once tied their hands together would be cut, and they would both be free. Any resulting children would be raised by the whole community if need be, and neither bride nor groom was ostracized for their choice to end the union. Tommy and I had been handfasted 6 years earlier on Inishmore, a year and a day after our marriage, not before, so that we could have a little party with friends after our elopement. I could look out my window right then and see that same island, and I could see the spiral of all the other times I had been there too. The ghost of myself 7.5 years before, stepping off the ferry with a heart unburdened by any of the years ahead. Returning with Tommy to be handfasted, and again for a baby moon when I was 4 months pregnant. Returning with Robin and Johanna for the baptism. Returning on a date with Shay just a few months before lockdown. Could I see the ghost of the next version of me who would be on the island too? Who would she travel with? I thought of how impossible it had been for me to leave my husband, how the only way I could walk out that door and stay out for my sake and my baby's was to believe that the good parts of our marriage still existed somewhere, were still real. I could not let him go until I gave myself permission to believe that we were still dancing to Leonard Cohen by candlelight in the freezing mobile home, warming each other, and that somewhere in space and time we always would be, and I could be there again whenever I needed to be. I couldn't set myself free until I knew I could return. There were darker moments too, of course, that would always be part of me, that would lurk in my body and heart as long as I lived. The most frightening moments with Tommy, with my father, moments that I will not hurt myself or a reader by detailing here. But crucially, the versions of me that lived in those moments weren't alone. A little light filtered down from farther along the spiral and reached them, light from all the good things I'd found and done since that helped heal them a little. And I started to see and to trust how things I hadn't even done yet were already helping to heal them too. I thought about texting with Claire in line at the bank while she wired the money for the castle. We'd spent that time talking about how we should totally co-write a story about a family of women who time travel when they're carrying each other. I looked at Robin by the TV, curls dancing as he bounced along to Puffin Rock, and I saw every version of him every day since his birth, saw my pregnant belly and felt his kicks from the inside again, the way his little feet kept pushing hard on my left ribs like he was lifting weights at a fetal gym, heard my own voice calling him little pearl baby as I looked for wild strawberries on the side of the road a few days before I knew for sure I was pregnant, reading him the Lucille Clifton poem Blessing the Boats on the day I did know for sure, before I'd even told Tommy. I'm remembering each of those moments here, now, writing this, from another point in the wheel of another year. And now you are too. So I really, that scene was really fun for me to write, and it was important to me to include little flashbacks to other points in my life in the body of the scene so that hopefully I was sort of modeling this kind of nonlinear way of storytelling as I was arguing about it with Shay, and that I got a big kick out of that, and so, but I think like that does, I think, have to do with trauma as well. And I think one of the things about experiencing something traumatic is it does kind of fracture your experience of time, and it can make your life feel less linear or less connected to itself. And writing this book was very cathartic and very healing for me, and very therapeutic. And I think figuring out how to tell a story of your life in a way that helps you to understand it and to accept it and to put it together again is very healing, And so the thinking of time as a spiral is an innately healing thing for me, which I think is one of the reasons that I really love living in Ireland, because you can feel in a sort of holistic way, you can feel that paradigm just sort of soaking through the culture, like our friend Diarmid, who talked about seeing the same lambs every year, so yeah.
I loved hearing that. Thank you so much. That was
You're welcome.
beautiful.
Thank you.
I don't know if Sarah had a question. Oh, I see a hand up there. Let's see.
Hi, Brandy.
Hi, Betsy. So I'm like halfway through the audiobook, and my very favorite genre of audiobook is memoirs read by their authors. And so this is like right up there. So I'm so curious to hear about like, have you done audiobooks for your previous ones? Was this one different? Did you want to read it or not want to read it? Like, how was
Yeah.
that whole experience?
That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I did want to read it. I have not read my own audiobooks before. So for my novels, they've hired voice actors who have been brilliant, And but I thought for this one, because it's nonfiction, it's a memoir, and it's so personal, I thought it would be weird to have an actor read it. I wanted to read it. So the logistics of it were very frustrating because I live in rural Ireland. I ended up recording it in a trailer at the edge of a field, which I just think is the most Ireland thing ever. It was like the only place that they could find to get it done in time. But it was great. The trailer was owned by this Irish language children's cartoon production company. And everyone there was super lovely, but they were also used to working on like Irish language media for young children. And so I was reading and of course I stumbled over like the like masculine dick time or something like that several times. It was embarrassing. But it was actually a really positive experience. I really enjoyed it. And it was great to like, because I always read my work out loud as I'm revising. I think that's one of the best things you can do, but it was nice to sort of have the book as a finished product and just go all the way through it. I think actually one thing we were talking about, I think Kathleen asked me before we started recording how long it took me to get used to pronunciation of Irish names. And that was the big thing that I hadn't thought about before doing the audiobook. Like at the beginning of the book, I have this little glossary of Irish words. And I thought, as I was like, I'm doing my part for the Irish language revival. I'm including some Irish words for my American audience, and they'll enjoy learning them, and it'll be educational and great. And then I got to the recording trailer, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to read all these words, and that was kind of terrifying, you know. And then also I had two different sound engineers. One of them was from Connemara, this region, and the other one is from up in the north, and they're very different dialects in the Irish language, and so the second sound engineer had me re-record a lot of the words in the way that he thought they should be pronounced, and I'm still kind of stressed out about that. But hopefully, most of the people listening, right, don't know. They'll be fine.
Yeah. Or they'll just let it go. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I haven't heard anything yet. So, but no, it was important to me to read the audiobook myself, and yeah, it's really cool to think that it's just out there now. So
It is. It's awesome. It was so cool to it's on Spotify. It's so cool.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, you can find it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I know I found it on Spotify, but I can't handle listening to
oh
myself.
no, don't listen to it. That sounds terrible. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Um,
Yeah, and I'll jump in with a question too. I wanted to thank you also. I know you've spoken with Kathleen, our director, and Jen, our assistant director. I'm the vice president of the board. We have Jackie Fisher, who's our president of the board, with us. So again, I just reiterate so many thanks for your generosity of time and joining us. I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was so engaging. I read it, really in as close to one sitting as I could. I have a 10-year-old, so it was a little interrupted, but and something that really struck me in it was the ideas of community. I know we know each other through the Smith alum community. I see a lot of friendly faces from the alum community with us today. And just that idea that kind of carries through. And even with the old knitting factory and maybe the communities that were there before. So just if if you want to speak maybe, or if you could speak about the old knitting factory and maybe communities that you've learned about who had inhabited the building or maybe been connected with the building before it came into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So I mentioned this sort of the old knitting factory briefly earlier in the talk. So basically, I had this dream of finding a weird old building that I could write a book about. And first, it was a castle, which the people who were in the Smith groups know about. I found this castle that was for sale, and I really tried to get I tried to get the owner to rent it to me so I could try to raise the money to buy it, and he ended up deciding not to do that. But then I eventually found this knitting factory, which is where I'm calling from right now. So spoilers, that one did work, but it's on a lake in Connemara on the west coast of Ireland, and it was built in 1906. As the real estate listing described it as a school that would teach rural women knitting skills that they could use to support themselves financially, which kind of presented it as almost a charitable organization. But the locals call it the knitting factory, not the knitting school. And I think that the difference between those two words says a lot about what its actual purpose was. It was more exploitative than charitable, I think, in some ways. And as I learned more about the history of the building after I moved here, I learned that it was built by an organization called the Congested Districts Board for Ireland, which was part of the Conservative Party in the UK. And their own stated goal, in their own words, was to kill home rule through kindness. So home rule being Ireland's governance of itself as an independent state. So they're basically through so-called pro-social programming like the knitting factory and workhouses and industrial schools and mother and baby homes. They were saying, why would you want to be independent from Britain when we give you all these wonderful things? But a lot of these wonderful things ended up treating the people who were there pretty badly, and especially the mother and baby homes are just have a shockingly cruel history that's still being uncovered to this day. There's the excavation of the Tuam mother and baby home, which I won't get into because it truly is horrific, but it's ongoing right now. There's still things a lot being uncovered. But I have gotten to meet a few women who worked at the knitting factory, and I was really interested I wanted to ask them, what, did you feel exploited, and so what most of them said to me is that it was just a job, and it was kind of, for most of them, it was their first job, and it wasn't kind of either extreme of this sort of romanticized noble charity work or this kind of horrific thing that I imagined it might have been as well. And so it wasn't particularly well paid, but it was just a first job. And a lot of the young women who worked here, saved their money and used it to emigrate. And a lot of them emigrated to the US. And that's something that's particularly moving for me to think about as an American who has immigrated here, you know. And so I do feel a connection to the other women who were working and trying to find their independence and making things with their hands in this space. And then after it was a knitting factory in the 1970s, it became the world's first Irish language cinema. And it was run by a man named Bob Quinn, who was the first sort of maker of Irish language films. And I've met Bob a few times as well. And one of my sort of long-term pipe dreams for the knitting factory is to show Irish films here again, although that requires a lot more funding than I have right now, but we might get there eventually. And then it was a jewelry studio in the 1990s. And by the time I got here, it was a sort of very little used vacation home that had been on the market for years without a sale. And that's why I was able to convince the owner to let me rent it while I tried to raise funds to buy it, which he very, very kindly did. And I initially thought that I would write a book proposal and sell the book proposal, and then use the advance as a down payment. And that did not work, but I ended up crowdfunding the price of the building. And it was by talking about my dreams for it with my communities, and particularly the Smith online communities. I would say between 80 and 90% of the crowdfunders were Smith alums, you know. And I was just one of the things that the book is about. And so this book I sold after I bought the knitting factory. And one of the things I wanted to talk about in the book is how much community saved me and my kid. And it was only through being honest about the scary situation we were in and being more vulnerable than I'd been taught it was socially acceptable to be, that I was able to receive the help that we really needed, you know. And I think that runs counter to especially my American conditioning to be sort of a rugged individual and pull myself up by my bootstraps and all of those things, but also the sort of romantic conditioning that I had. And I love romance novels and stories. There's romance in my books. I'm not trying to like denigrate romance, but also at the same time, it can be very individualistic. This idea that you find one person and then that's your happily ever after is like the tiny unit that you make together. And one of the shifts in my life over the time period that is covered in this book is moving from the sort of fantasy of a happy ending being my marriage to being part of a wider community, you know. And I think, and that is something ironically that I had tried to do in my fiction from the jump, and it just sort of took me longer to realize that it was what I wanted for my own life too. But to go from imagining a happy ending being falling in love with someone to imagining, you know, a happy ending if being in community and everybody taking care of each other. And I do think that's still kind of a radical thing in storytelling, and it's something I wanted to offer, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. Did other people have questions that they would like to ask? I feel like I've been monopolizing you, Betsy.
You ask great questions. So yeah.
I had how have you changed the knitting factory, the physical building itself? How
Yeah.
did you make that work for a group?
Right. So it's I think one of the things to know is that the word factory is slightly misleading in terms of size. You know, this is essentially a cottage. And it's big enough for myself and my kid and one other family at a time. So I haven't, and I basically scraped together everything I had and all the crowdfunding I could do to just buy this building. The purchase was finalized in spring 2022. And then I had this sort of weird old building that needed a lot of renovation. And I did start having funded rest residents right away. I've had them every year since I started, but I haven't felt able to fully open because the house is old and weird. The bathroom is terrible. It's just like, you know, it needs a lot of work. And so I have, just as of 2 months ago, we sort of have broken ground on the big renovations that the house has needed since I moved in here. And a lot of that's kind of boring, invisible stuff like better insulation and rewiring and replumbing and things like that. But I am redoing the terrible bathroom and getting better windows put in and that kind of thing. And so the construction company tells me that we will be done in the spring, which I hope is true. And so my plan is to sort of grandly reopen in the spring, and there will be a fully independent apartment with a kitchen and bathroom for one family at a time, one single parent and her kids for the funded residencies. And then my hope is to offset the cost of those funded residencies by offering paid residencies. So anyone can come and book the space to stay as to do a residency for like 3 days or a week or something like that. And eventually I would also like to offer group writing retreats. And there is, we're on a lake. The property includes like 80 meters of private lakefront, which is amazing, but it also needs extensive landscaping. And so that's kind of, everyone told me when I started this project that it was a multi-decade project, and I think I've kind of, that's the reality of that has become clear to me since I bought the house. So I think, I've gotten a very, I've thankfully, another smithy has actually sort of helped me to get the loan that I needed to do these big renovations, but that kind of, again, maxed me out for this phase. So I'm renovating the building. And then my hope is the next step will be sort of renovating the grounds. And after that, I'll be able to do the group retreats. But even when that happens, people will probably be staying in a local B&B or something like that, because like I said, there's only room for one family at a time in the building itself. Yeah. So.
I want to commend you not only on your writing, but your sense of community, your ability to build community. And I know you didn't build the smithy community, but you're building communities wherever you go.
Thank you.
That's a marvelous thing. Do you have thoughts about your next book? I almost don't want to ask because this just came out.
Yeah. Yes. So, well, I have a wonderful Smithy literary agent now who's a new agent for me for this project. Her name is Dara Kay, and she has been incredible. I actually met her through the Friday Tea group, and she's been just the best agent on planet Earth, I think. And she has gotten me some ghostwriting jobs that are a lot of fun and that I can't talk about more specifically right now because obviously it's ghostwriting, but that's a new field for me, and it's one that I've really enjoyed. I think especially I have felt really vulnerable having such a personal story come out, so it's actually been a real pleasure for me to get to collaborate and do the sort of fun writing craft stuff that I enjoy, but with somebody else's sort of emotional weight. That's been great for me. So I'm very happy to do some ghostwriting for a while.
I see a few people in the chat, and I know we don't want to keep you too long, but we have Elizabeth saying she'd love to be on a writer's retreat. And I don't think I'll say the name. Irene, an amazing space, so peaceful and nurturing.
Yes, Irene has visited us at the Knitting Factory, so you can take her word for it, hopefully. Yeah.
And I wanted to mention your website and ways people can support you there. Could you give us just a little bit of that?
Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah. So you can find me at betsycornwell.com and also oldknittingfactory.com to learn more about the project. The most crucial support that we get, that the Knitting Factory project gets, is through Patreon. So if you are interested in supporting us, you can sign up for our Patreon page. It's a sort of monthly or annual subscription platform at any level that works for you. I teach online writing classes through the Knitting Factory that you get access to as a member that are also recorded and put on the Patreon website. We also have stickers and t-shirts and mugs and fun stuff like that. And you can also buy Ring of Salt or any of my other books. I always say the best way to do that is to go in person to your local bookstore and ask for them, because often the bookseller will take an interest or will order a few copies to stock if they don't stock it already. So I think for any author, that's the best thing you can do is go in person and ask. But I do also have the Knitting Factory has a bookshop.org affiliate link. So if you click on the links through my website, you can order through bookshop.org, which supports local bookstores and will also give us a little bit of a kickback, which is handy. So yeah.
I wanted to say thank you so much. I'm enjoying your book so much. It's such a pleasure to meet you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you
No,
so
this is
much
wonderful.
for
Thank you.
Zooming with us.
Delighted to get to do this and to see so many. I think one of the best things about this book coming out and getting to do the tour and getting to do events like this is I see so many names of people that I know because they were Knitting Factory supporters or I knew them through the Smith groups, and it really means a lot to me to have them coming to support the book. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and this has been a real pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to let you
Thank
go back
you.
to your child, and
No
thank you
worries.
again for everything.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks. All right, so is there any wrap up that you guys would like to do, or we're all set? Yeah.
No, I just wanted to thank you again so much for connecting with us